Hey everybody, my name is John David Richardson. I am an annualized adjunct instructor here at DAP. I teach full-time. I've been here for 6 years now. I teach photography and fine arts in the School of Art. I'm here to talk today about a story that I worked on for Business Insider that most recently the team at Business Insider won a George Polk Award for. It's the True Cost of A.I. data centers. And I spent a series of 4 days photographing Amazon, Google, and Meta's data center sites and the surrounding community in between New Albany, Ohio, and the Columbus area. So when I was in New Albany and Columbus, I had been given the text and information pertaining to the story. And so as a fine artist, I'm often telling myself and my students to be aware of what I call poetic observation, which is when you know what work you're working on, whether that be editorial or fine art work, and you are seeking out to find where that story and the visuals connect. And so I was given the task of going to these different sites between Meta, Google, and Amazon. They each have like multiple data centers in that area. And I was given the assignment to document how those data centers and the rural Midwestern landscape and rural quality of life were colliding against one another. And if you're there and you're in that situation, it's very evident. And so when I was there, it was like the early stage of most of the data center construction. And so a lot of what I was seeing versus direct water usage or direct energy usage, it was early stages of those spaces being constructed in people's backyards. And so I was looking at family farms, housing, and how the data center was either happening in their front yard or in their backyard, and showing that contrast between the two of those things. Additionally, I'm also, poetic observation, I'm paying attention to photographs or scenes that feel like the Midwestern landscape in Ohio, and how that kind of piece is being disrupted by construction. But then there's also not just the data centers, but the energy facilities that are being constructed beside those data centers to help them be powered. And so I was really looking for that contrast, that collision between those two things. Those things were really visible as far as like huge cranes and dust plumes and like really loud noise and trucks moving in and out. And so that part was very much visible. I think what I was searching for were ways where towers of the energy structure grid, like leaning over top of the tree line into someone's like backyard, or a community that's like blocked off by a flood wall, but over top of the flood wall you see like a huge cloud of like dust. And so a lot of what I was noticing was spaces being carved out in the landscape for these buildings and structures to be constructed. And so like dirt roads, gravel roads, kind of offshooting off of the main road, in and around people's property. There was just a lot of disruption, visually, sound, air quality. It just felt like constant construction. And so I was documenting that. In addition to that, I'm also looking at like a lot of barriers, because fencing from people's property to keep people out of their property, barriers, like big plastic barriers that we'd see like on the side of the road and things like that, used to stop people from going in and out of sites. At one point, I was trying to find the Meta data center, and there were these like huge barriers that were like spray painted with Facebook on the front of them, and that gave me a pretty obvious indicator of where I was at. For me, photography I've always been interested in photography's role at telling the truth or communicating something to a larger group of people. And so in my own fine art work, I'm very much interested in this engagement with documentary photography and truth-telling, and both how that's been effective, but also how it's been used as a tool to press people and to control folks. And so being able to work on a story where it affects real people in a real space, in a community that's very close to me, it was an honor. No large story like this ever is just tackled by one person. And so to be a part of a team that helped document, to report, to write about really serious, pressing issues that are happening in the now. So I think the reason that designers, artists, and architects should be aware and be engaging with the conversation of AI is because it's not going anywhere. And often what I tell my students is if something doesn't feel right, it's usually not right. And so in photography, we've been using AI-assisted tools for a long time. We've been using those in the Adobe Creative Suite and like Photoshop and Lightroom. In design, designers, architects are also using those in their prospective programs as well. And so those tools have been integrated in those softwares for a long time. I often tell my students that you're getting a degree in not just those skills, but critical and creative thinking. And that's why you are sought out by the industry, is because you are using those creative and critical skills that you're learning to provide not only a service, but a different layer and level of thinking than maybe someone who isn't engaging with those types of ideas. And so for me, where AI gets complicated is that when it moves beyond a tool that you're using to further your work or assist you in a way that makes the work stronger, but also continues to keep your original and creative voice, versus using tools as a means to do the lifting for you. And so I'm often telling students to listen to yourself. If something feels wrong, it's probably not right. And that doesn't mean you're going to get it right every time, but I think that with every kind of like 10 years or generation, there's something or multiple things that affect the kind of cultural and creative zeitgeist. And right now, that's AI. There's lots of things that have happened kind of along the way. But there's always this, when something new happens that disrupts the world or an industry or what have you, there's always this engagement with like, do we accept it or do we push it away? For me, and this is just my opinion, I think that the urge to immediately shun something or push something away doesn't make it go away, but it also, at least when I tell my students, it is a disservice for you to not acknowledge that something is changing, and you should figure out how to integrate that into your practice, or to at least have a conversation about why you do or do not engage with that in your practice. AI is complicated. We're just like on the verge of figuring out kind of how this is impacting everybody, and both on like a creative level and like a personal level, environmentally. Sometimes opportunities arise when you have the opportunity to engage with real life conversations that affect real life people in real ways. And for me, that's what creativity and art, that's when it has the opportunity to reach people in a wider way. When you can merge this like creativity, this personal, and this like real life world to tell a story.